So I'm just thinking back to 2020. Now, I had just been discarded by my partner of the last 11 years. He sat me down in the August and told me he was in love with another woman. And then there was a period where he just basically made his decisions and said he was going to sell this house in Spain, sell his other house in York, and then made an offer. Within 2 days, written out a letter which started deal rain. And I basically thought he was having some sort of nervous breakdown. I didn't. I was really shocked by what he did and how he did it and what he said. And he'd just come out of a 2-day transformation coaching with an ex-GP. He'd only been in Spain a day or 2 days. And then all of a sudden, everything was changed. It was just completely changed. All of the life that I had in front of us was completely pulled from underneath, and the rug was just pulled away. Didn't have any discussion of like, what do you want to happen? How can I help you? Or like, there wasn't any of that. The only thing I remember is that I did ask for one of two things. The first one was that I would have liked him to pay off a mortgage that I had in the UK, because that would have meant I would have had some security. He did, in this letter that he'd wrote, actually put in that he would pay off the mortgage. But the way he worded this letter was that I actually had to leave the property where I was before I would get the money to pay off the mortgage. And I just thought, well, hold on a minute. If I leave the property where I'm at now, and then the money doesn't come through, there was no payment or anything, then what? I didn't have any legal advice at that point. I wasn't in a position to seek legal advice. So basically I thought, well, I'm not happy to leave the house. And I know he said he was going to sell the property. So I did look around and I did sort of do a lot of work on like what sort of property would I be able to buy if the house would sell at a certain point, like price, then how much money I would have to actually look for something else. And the options weren't a lot, to be quite honest. So I was looking for something that would have maybe 2 bedrooms, some garden space, would have to be between, say 85,000 euros or 90,000 euros, and still be in the countryside. And that was a big ask to find something that would be suitable. But I looked at lots of different options, and then after a week, then I thought, do you know something? I'd rather just stay here. So I had in my mind that if I could be allowed to stay here, then I could turn this place, this villa, into a business that would support me, and perhaps then he would wait and I would be able to buy him out of the property and be able to continue living here where I felt safe and where I felt secure. So anyway, he had then decided that he would pay for me to have this transformational 2-day coaching, which the ex-GP decided that would be able to do that through Zoom instead of having to take flights and find a hotel and hire a car and everything that he'd actually thought of. So this GP said, okay, we could schedule this one. It was scheduled for the 12th and the 13th of September. And before that happened, I looked at how I might be able to give him a share in a property that I have in the UK. If he was willing to pay off the mortgage or redeem the mortgage that was left, that would give me some income, monthly income, then I would give him the option of having the equity from that property. So if any point that property was sold, he would get his money back. That's the plan I came up with, because then the house would have been unencumbered and the money, the rental income would have come to me. And I had lots of other different ideas. I'm never short on the ideas. Whether or not they're good ideas or not, a different thing, but the ideas are there. So this particular day, I had it in my mind to actually speak to him. So I was looking, he wasn't in the house, and I thought, right, where's he gone? So I went up to a separate annex, which we called the games room, because that room had a snooker table, dartboard, a bar, a projection system, so we can watch movies in the evening. And I found him up there, and he was sitting having a conversation with someone. I didn't know who he was talking to, but as I got into the room, he then looked at me and said, "Oh, he's Lorraine," and looked at his iPad and said, "Debbie, this is Lorraine. Lorraine, this is Debbie." He actually introduced me to the woman who he had told me that he was in love with. He sat there as if it was a natural thing to do. And I basically heard her voice piping up, and she said hello, and then, "I think you're doing remarkably well." And I looked at Paul and said, "I tell you what, I'll write you an email." Turned round and walked away. I couldn't actually have a conversation with him. I had to write my proposal in an email to send him. And I did send it to him. And he looked at it. But when we came to meet to actually discuss the proposal that I had written, he had been angered by something that I put together, which was a GoFund page, because I was basically worried that I was going to be left here without an income. I'd asked about paying off the mortgage. He said he didn't have the money. I thought, well, okay. You know what? I just don't know. So basically, he shut me down on any of the proposal that I'd written out. As I was going to open an email that I'd sent to him, so I could say, okay, let's go through this and discuss the options. He didn't want to know anything about that. In fact, he just shut that down and said something like, "Before you look at that, I don't think you've quite understood, or maybe I haven't made myself clear." And then proceeded to tell me what he wanted and what he needs. And that's how he started off. He closed down any discussion, any conversation straight away, and just basically said, I'm going to tell you what I need and what I want. And that was how he started the 23 minutes long, one-sided, if you can call it a discussion, basically telling me that I had to respect him, respect his property, behave as I've requested, was what he said. Behave as I've requested. And I was questioning, what? What does behave as you request? And that's when he said, respect him and respect his property. And there was more, but it's going to be written out. It's in the book that I'm putting together, and that book will be published within a few months. Hoping to get it out as an ebook first and then published on a few different channels. And that book is called What Type of Man? And it's about betrayal, abandonment, post-separation abuse. And it's partly my story, but also partly to do with the legal conflict that can happen when you've got a person who can be in a controlling and basically emotionally abusive towards the other person, without any empathy or anything, without listening properly to anything that that person says, and basically telling them that your future security depends on having me on your side. So that's how my partner spoke to me in the 23 minutes that was meant to be a discussion that didn't really work as a discussion, and basically went downhill from there on in.